Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant, question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. Today we discuss Navy SEAL training after a candidate dies following Hell Week. Plus, the Biden administration's grip on Afghanistan's money. Sit tight. The show starts now. The world according to Jesse.
Hi, I'm Mollye Barrows in for Vegeta Santos. For our top story today, a Navy SEAL candidate died after successfully completing Hell Week, a grueling training exercise considered the toughest in the U.S. military. 24-year-old Kyle Mullen of New Jersey was one of two Navy SEAL trainees who became ill immediately after the February 4th exercise. One survived, but Mullen died of, quote, unknown causes, and the military is now investigating his death. This tragedy has renewed the debate about the safety of Navy SEAL training. According to an NBC investigation, the U.S. Navy produces between 200 and 250 SEALs a year, and as many as 17 have died in training accidents over the last 2 decades. Among those is 21-year-old Derek Lovelace, a SEAL candidate who died in 2016. His family still has questions about the role an instructor may have possibly played in his death. And Derek's father, James Lovelace, says another life gone is a tragedy. But some say this is the cost of creating elite warriors, that surviving life-threatening situations is the point, because more fighters could die in combat if training is geared toward a perfect safety record instead of real-life warfare. So, Jesse, you were a member of Underwater Demolition SEAL Team 12. You went through training like this. What exactly is Hell Week for those who don't know, and what's it like?
Well, first and foremost, Molly, let me add my sympathy to Kyle Mullen's family. My deepest sympathy to them for the loss of their son. He can never be replaced. But bear in mind, he volunteered. This was something he wanted very badly, and ultimately he died for it. Now, having said that, and having gone through Navy SEAL training, people need to understand something, and that is this, is that this is the most difficult training available, and the people that go into Navy SEAL training volunteer to do so. And there is a huge screening process. You don't just enlist in the Navy and get sent to Navy SEALs. You have to volunteer, you have to pass physical requirements to get there. And when you get there, a class probably starts with about 100 people who have qualified, and it will probably graduate 25 to 30 at the end. It is extremely difficult. Now, why does it have to be that way? It has to be that way because as a Navy SEAL, when you become one, literally every day of your life, you will defy death in some manner, even in training. And when you're sent on missions, you have to go into that mission understanding that you could die in the attempt to complete that mission. And that's what SEAL training has to bring out in you. Now, I'll give you an example of one that I went through. We faced a 15-mile run. It's mandatory. That morning, we had to do PT, and every instructor did their favorite exercise, and we had one instructor who liked the 4-count deep knee bend. I don't even think they do that today. And he ended up cranking us through 1,200 of them, because we kind of misbehaved a little. And so we're facing now a 15-mile run in the sand in combat boots after doing 1,200 deep knee bends that morning. We thought that we were going to be the first class who no one completed the run. The class would be wiped out and there would be no class 58 picture on the wall. We got out to the beach. First thing they did, we ran to the beach, they ran us into the ocean and got us soaking wet. So you began the run totally soaking wet with the idea was in our heads, no one's gonna make it. We got about 100 yards down the beach and one of my classmates yelled out at the top of his lungs, "Are we there yet?" I burst out laughing. And at that moment, it hit me. I'm going to complete this or die trying. And that's the way it turned out. Many of us, the majority of us, completed the run. Some did not. Those I never saw again. They were taken away in an ambulance. You have to remember, an ambulance follows SEAL training every minute of the day. And why? Because once you get to the SEAL team, you will be asked to do missions where you put your life on the line. And it requires a certain individual to be able to do that. And you go in with the clear thinking, I could die for this. Well, training, you revert back to that. When you get in situations, you will always go back to your training. That's what will get you through any situation that you face later on in the SEAL team. It is not for everybody. It is an elite few that can qualify for this type of training and this type of duty, and we need to understand we need those people in which to succeed. Unfortunately, the training has to be that difficult where there might be casualties.
Absolutely. And you know, with a commitment like that, with a decision to see it through no matter what, even if they were experiencing symptoms, they might not want to speak up or say anything. That's why it's interesting that 2 of them fell ill immediately following the training. So when you have mottos like die first then quit, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to die trying, do you think it's all but impossible for trainees to admit when they're struggling? They want to finish it first.
Well, certainly they want to, but you can quit at any time. You know, what's interesting, they have the bell there that you ring now. 3 rings of the bell means you quit. Well, I can proudly say they didn't have that bell when I went through, because my class is the class that presented that bell to the instructors after we graduated. So from my class on, you have to ring the bell to quit. You can quit at any time, but you have to have the mental capability that no, they're not going to make me quit. Anything they throw at me, I'm going to succeed, and you're going to need that later down the line, because the jobs they're going to send you to do are going to be just as tough, if not tougher, than training itself.
Absolutely. So that's the bottom line. It doesn't necessarily need to be safer, this training, you don't think? It's just that people need to understand that these are the risks involved when you sign up to do it.
Exactly, and these are what a young man accepts when he volunteers. And let me repeat that. You volunteer for this type of duty. You're not assigned to it. And believe me, 75 or 80% of the people wash out, and you're left with 25 to 30% who will end up being Navy SEALs.
And you among them, which is amazing. So thank you so much for your perspective on that. Well, we turn now to a lawsuit, Jesse. Several states have filed against the Biden administration over giving federal civilian employees a pay raise. Now, this hike went into effect January 30th and raised the rate from $10.95 an hour to $15 an hour. The attorneys general of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi want the court to overturn it. They say these higher costs will lead to, quote, economic disaster for residents and bring unemployment and inflation, because these expenses will be passed on to consumers or end up putting companies out of business altogether. But another study finds that actually raising the federal minimum wage will reduce the pay gap we hear so much about, especially for women and people of color. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh believes it will also improve employee retention at a time when keeping employees has been tough. The pandemic has exacerbated and spotlighted a lot of this income inequality. Billionaires became $1.3 trillion richer the first year of the pandemic alone, while more than 80 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits since it began around March of 2020. So, Jesse, in this lawsuit, these state AGs are basically saying the problem is these workers are making more money, and the solution is to take that money and cut it. But aren't there other ways they could tackle this? I mean, couldn't the same thing be said for capping or cutting their own salaries?
You know, this makes me almost want to laugh, Molly, because don't they understand a basic concept that the economy is driven by spending? You spend money. That's what makes the economy. That's the gas that fuels the engine of the economy. If you reduce wages, people can't buy as many things, and they thus spend less. Therefore, the economy then slows down. Taking minimum wage and upgrading it does nothing but help everybody. It helps society as a whole. And you talk about fiscal disparity. We just got through talking about my life as a Navy SEAL. Well, before I did that, I ran the jackhammer for the State Highway Department for 10 hours a day. Those were the two most difficult jobs I've had in my life, and I got paid the least amount of money to do them. Yet you've got CEOs profiting by the millions and billions during this pandemic while the workers are struggling. It brings me back to my position. Rather than worrying about minimum wage, let's incorporate a maximum wage, like $1 million a month, $12 million a year. Name me someone who couldn't survive on $1 million a month. So this is utterly ridiculous what these people are doing, holding down people from earning wages better than minimum wage. It's ridiculous, and it'll destroy the economy, not help it.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you talk about the maximum wage, which I think is a fascinating concept. We don't hear enough about it, feel like. But a maximum wage cap, how would that compare? Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great. It's a great idea. How do you think it compares to like individual tax hikes on higher incomes, like a tax for the wealthy, if you will, or a tax on luxury goods? Do you think that that is different in some ways from, say, a maximum wage cap?
Well, first and foremost, I wish we'd abolish the income tax and go to a national sales tax. If we did that, there'd be no deductions. It would all be done at the point of purchase. You wouldn't have to keep books anymore because you'd pay your taxes when you bought something, and businesses are already paying taxes, business to government. So if we went to a national sales tax and abolished the income tax, that would solve this whole problem. But that's not going to happen. So, or unlikely to happen. So we're stuck with what we have now. And certainly people need better wages. Wages spur the economy. They do not depress it. And that's a concept people need to understand. As I said before, it's the gasoline that runs the engine.
Absolutely. All boats rise with the tide. Well, in other news, the Biden administration is freeing up $7 billion in Afghan money, but it will not be returned to the country that actually owns it. The Afghan central bank's assets were frozen after the United States withdrew from the country in August and the Taliban took over. President Joe Biden signed an order splitting that money between, quote, unspecified humanitarian aid for the already suffering Afghan people, as well as a trust fund for victims of the 9/11 terror attacks. Remember, there are a lot of lawsuits that are still outstanding in regards to that. But some American economists say the Afghan central bank is independent from the Taliban, and seizing this money is bringing the economy of an already poverty-stricken country to a standstill. People can't access their cash. Some workers, including teachers and government workers, are going without paychecks. In short, there's little money to keep the economy going and to do business, and people are going to continue to suffer and have to continue to rely on humanitarian aid. So, Jesse, it was Biden's withdrawal that prompted Afghanistan's economic crisis in the first place. What do you think he should do with this money?
I think, personally, he should give the money back to the Afghan bank. It's their money. How is it that we're in charge of their money? If this money belongs to them, it should go to who it belongs to. It shouldn't have some other entity come in and take it away. That would be like you having a bank account and the government coming in and taking it from you. You know, what right do we have to do that? What right does Joe Biden have to take Afghans' money? They didn't invite us into their country. We went in of our own accord and started the war in their country. It wasn't them asking us to come there. So now we're going to take their money. So not only did we fight a war in their country, it appears now we're going to rob them.
Yes, I know. It's an interesting situation all the way around. Well, turning now to another story, German kitchen appliance maker Bosch has a plan to revolutionize surveillance technology. Bosch-owned startup Azena is developing a line of surveillance cameras that provide smart analysis, so-called smart analysis, of people, objects, and places. Customers can use the company's app to choose from different cutting-edge tools that collect information, different kinds of information from everyday surveillance video. It can be used to do everything from identify and detect faces, someone's ethnicity, their gender, as well as analyzing their emotions. Although some people doubt that's possible, they say that they can do that and also possibly identify suspicious behavior. So this is coming with a slew of concerns about abuse, Jesse. The technology will be used to invade people's privacy, that they'll discriminate. Maybe if somebody's identified as angry or they pass a backpack, it could be perceived as doing something criminal and flagged as suspicious and result in somebody being stopped and questioned. What do you think about this? Are we getting too carried away? Can we expect users in this company to be responsible, or do we need tougher laws to tackle this?
Well, Molly, you know darn well it's going to get abused. It may come in with the best of intentions. It may come in to solve this particular problem. But for every upside, there's going to be a downside to it. And this technology in identifying people, it's laughable. You know it's going to be abused. You know it's going to be used on innocent people to keep track of us like they're doing right now. All they want to do is collect all the information they can on every individual that lives and breathes in the world. And without a doubt, that's why I'm laughing about it. Of course it's going to get abused. The problem is, when will it get abused and how much damage will be done before we find out that, yes, indeed, they're abusing it?
Yes, I know, you're right, because there's surveillance cameras everywhere. And if people have access to that, we're never free of a watching eye. We thought it was big government watching us, Big Brother, but it's actually everybody else. So it's time for a quick break. When we come back, Jesse talks with writer and activist Maura Quint about tax justice. Stay with us.
The world according to Jesse. My guest today is Maura Quint, campaign director for Americans for Tax Fairness and co-founder of the Tax March. She joins me now from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Maura, what's the most pressing tax issue people should know about but might not have on their radar screen right now?
That is a very good question. And I think it is exactly how rich billionaires are getting, because we know they're rich, but it is massively, massively out of control. And the inequality that is being created is getting unbelievably extreme. Last year, America's billionaires got $100 trillion richer. Just last year alone, during a pandemic when everyone else was suffering and struggling, they added a tremendous amount to their wealth. And I think people generally know that, but I don't think that people recognize exactly how big that number is, because it's kind of inconceivable. So just to sort of break it down, just the top 10 billionaires in America, they were earning, let me see here, I want to make this sure I get it right, $1,260 per second per billionaire. In 1 minute, they were making about, on average, $75,600. That's nearly the median household income for an average family the entire year. It's extreme. And it's one of those things that we have to kind of keep reminding ourselves just how crazy these numbers are, because it's hard to get our heads around.
It sure is. Now, the concept of taxing the rich is incredibly popular with Americans. How likely is Congress to move on this issue?
You know, that's a really good question. It is so much closer than it ever was, which I don't mean in like a, oh, we're getting there kind of way. I mean, we're right at the cusp. We actually could move on this. There is strong support, especially from Democrats, although there are some Republicans as well who have put out taxing the rich proposals. There is general public support that is driving our lawmakers to actually start putting these things through. We are very, very close right now on several bills that would tax the wealthy. And even the Build Back Better package that's been going back and forth, and is it alive or dead, but that Biden has put forth, has several tax the rich proposals as part of it. That's how that is being funded, by raising taxes on the wealthy.
But it's failing, so we're not raising
It is
taxes on
failing.
the wealthy. Now, grassroots activism can help drive political change. Can it do the same for tax policy?
Absolutely, it can. It absolutely can. It matters. I mean, all of our electeds, they're supposed to work for us. They do take down when we write letters, when we make calls, when they're getting asked these questions in public forums, especially when you see someone, when your representative is talking, ask them where they stand on extreme wealth inequality. Ask them where they stand on taxing the rich. They do take this in. It does make a difference. It's incredibly important.
Is there any legislation being proposed in Congress now that your organization is supporting or fighting against?
Yeah, there are many. I think the one that I want to point to the most actually is the billionaire's income tax, which was proposed by Senator Wyden in the fall. And this is specifically looking at the way in which billionaires avoid taxes because they earn their money in a completely different way than the rest of us do. They don't have an income coming in. They're not getting a paycheck like we are. They're not clocking in hours. They're making their money off of capital gains, and those are going very, very largely untaxed. So the billionaire's income tax is something that is looking to change the way our tax system fundamentally values work and wealth. Because right now, our tax system values wealth over work. If you just are born into money, you don't have to pay as much in taxes than if you're someone who has spent your life laboring, going to a job, working multiple jobs, working your butt off. You are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires are, and that's fundamentally wrong.
Now we're seeing record levels of inflation, even from corporations that have been profitable during the pandemic. What's your take on this? Are supply chain issues legitimate, or is this a convenient excuse to gouge customers?
Well, it's both, right? We've all had some experience during a pandemic, I think, where we've gone in looking for something we were used to buying, maybe at the grocery store, and it just wasn't there because we did have a tremendous pandemic happening, something unprecedented in our lifetimes that took people out of the workforce, that upset and disrupted supply chains. That absolutely was real. But now we're looking at corporations who saw that as another way that they could exercise a tremendous amount of greed. It was an opportunity. So you have this already happening, and now you have these corporations that are showing tremendous profits while at the same time jacking up prices because they think they can get away with it. And that is a tremendous problem.
Now, in your experience, is there anything Congress can do to bring these costs down, especially since wages aren't keeping up with the price increases?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of different things that need to be done. I think you were just talking about how we need to raise the minimum wage. We need to first and foremost raise wages. People should be making more money than they currently are, the majority of workers. But there are other things that can be done. The Biden administration actually just recently announced an action to strengthen competitiveness in the meat industry because meat prices were continually going up. The moment that was announced, the meat prices began to fall. There's a lot of individual actions that are happening, but, there's a lot more. There's a ton that we need to do. Uh, we also need to worry about what people are spending money on and how we can change those costs, and there's a tremendous amount of money that's being spent on healthcare and surprise medical bills, and so there's regulations that can be put in place or that we can fundamentally change the way that we deal with our medical industry and consumer pricing and how that's affecting people because if you are not in tremendous medical debt, you can afford more things at the grocery store.
Now, during the pandemic, of course, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer around the world. What is it about our global economic system that allows this to happen?
We have absolutely built a system where the wealthiest are allowed to amass tremendous wealth and then, with that wealth, affect the systems and affect the laws. When you have tons and tons of money, you can go in and you can make particular choices and influences on our electoral cycle. And you can do them so that they benefit you, so that they continue to benefit you. And that's really what we have happening here over and over. When we have allowed individuals and corporations to put huge amounts of money into our democratic processes. Uh, we just did a report at Americans for Tax Fairness looking at the election cycles. And in the 2020 election cycle, billionaires contributed nearly $1 out of every 10 that went into our election cycle. Before the Citizens United happened, so looking before 2010, billionaires were contributing less than 1%. And they now have a much louder voice, and it's increasing every election cycle. So we absolutely need to change that very, very quickly so that we can start having more of a voice as people in our elected systems.
Maura, unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank you very much for your expertise, and we'll have you back maybe when tax time is over with to see what the results were.
I can't wait. Thank you.
The world according to Jesse.
Thank you so much for watching. Send us your comments about the episode on Facebook and Twitter. We love hearing from you, and we'll see you next week when we cover more stories ignored by the corporate media.
The world according to Jesse.